eventually into Puerto Natales. It's just starting this year. Actually, they're going to be starting around December 6th, because kind of the first week of December is when the LAN and Sky, which are the two main airlines in Chile, are going to begin these flights to Puerto Natales. So initially they're starting out this selectively, so LAN is going to fly on Tuesdays and Saturdays directly from Santiago to Puerto Natales, and then Sky is planning on doing Tuesday, Friday, and Sunday for their initial service down to Puerto Natales. So now you can avoid this 5-hour drive. It's no additional cost for any transfers that Awasi would provide, and you arrive in Puerto Natales, and then it's only a 1-hour drive from the Puerto Natales airport to Awasi. I was looking at this because the announcement from LAN and Sky was initially saying we're going to be doing Tuesdays and Saturday services, and this is I have it here as the timetable. But I was just playing around on their website, actually looking into this, and LAN had said that depending upon demand, we were going to open up other frequencies throughout the week, and I was just plugging in dates for like January and February, and there was actually days outside of Tuesday and Saturday. There was Mondays, there was some Thursdays where this LAN flight was actually available, and that the flight number is LAN Flight 1, and LAN Flight 2 is the return flight. So if you start looking around on that in flight searches, you actually see that LAN has already seen the demand for this, so they're doing other weekly departures. So I'm pretty sure that that's an indicator showing that there's demand for these flights, and we're going to start seeing this probably daily direct nonstop service to Puerto Natales from Santiago after this initial season. So it's fantastic news. However, if people are still coming from Punta Arenas, either if they're flying in here for whatever reason, or they might be coming on like the Cruceros Australis vessels, navigating along here and arriving to Punta Arenas, we still do provide a service from Punta Arenas to Awasi, and that service, though, we do bill additional for it just because we do it with a private vehicle for guests. And again, I said we pass along a net rate, so it's a supplement of around $200 to $250 for a private vehicle from Punta Arenas to Awasi. And then likewise, if people are connecting their trip going over into Argentina to El Calafate, we will take them free to the border, which is kind of the norm anyways. Most people that are going into Argentina are going to be dealing with an Argentine operator who will be there to pick the guest up at the Argentine border and take care of them as they proceed into Argentina, or vice versa. We can also provide the additional cost of a completely private transfer from Awasi to El Calafate if guests need that. So fantastic news. We kind of knew this was going to happen, and it finally has. So we're really excited that this is going to make Torres del Paine much more accessible for guests. So talking a bit about the property, this really cool, again here, because Awasi want to do things differently, the design element of this here was thinking about looking around the buildings in the local area and how can we build a property that really blends into the environment. And really the only other structure that you find this far south in Patagonia are small gaucho outposts. So that was the design idea behind building Awasi Patagonia. For map geeks like me, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the park. So this you see is actually the Southern Patagonia Ice Camp, all the white bit and the glaciers coming down here into the lakes. And so pretty much Torres del Paine National Park, in terms of just the park boundary, is like this. It comes down and it goes around Lake Sarmiento, and then it does this, and then it goes again on into the Southern Patagonia Ice Cap. Awasi Patagonia is not located inside the park boundaries. We did not want to be inside the park boundaries. The park boundary, I mean, there's very few places you can build a lodge within the park boundaries, and it's also a very busy park nowadays when you get on the main roads. We were looking for some place where people could have this feeling, the thing about Patagonia is the vastness and the wildness of it, so we wanted to find a location that really reflected what Patagonia is. It's truly wild. So Awasi Patagonia is actually located here, right at the base of what's called this ridge, which is called Sierra Contreras. And what we did was actually this whole area was an enormous sheep ranch called Estancia Tercera Barranca. And so the Awasi property, actually, we have what's called the Awasi Patagonia Private Reserve. It's a 15,000 acre private reserve where we're located, where there will be no development, where there won't be large scale ranching activity. And then within that 15,000 acre private reserve, we have the property where the property is built on a private amount of 250 acres. So this is where we're located. To get from Awasi Patagonia to the park gate, which is called the Sarmiento Gate, the park boundary, it's about a 20-minute drive there to get to the park boundary. But when you're talking about Torres del Paine National Park in Patagonia, you have to realize, distances are enormous. The national park, Torres del Paine National Park, covers 900 square miles of land. 900 square miles. I mean, that's enormously vast. So, you know, distances even from one side of the park to the other can take an hour and a half to drive on that. So we'll talk a bit more about that in terms of the size of the park and excursions when I get to the excursion bit. So I'm just going to show you around the lodge a little bit. This is our main lodge. You can see it behind us. That's Sierra Contreras, the ridge. So this is inside the common building, common areas where the lounge, the bar, the seating areas are, and then our restaurant as well. Same thing here. Actually, backtracking, Awasi Patagonia, we're not affiliated with Virtuoso. We were invited to join Virtuoso, but it didn't really make sense for us because this property is only open seasonally. So we're open from pretty much October through until about April 1st each year. And because of the small size and the demand for it, it didn't make sense to join Virtuoso. We are, however, the only Relais Chateau property in Toros del Paine National Park, and also Awasi Patagonia is a signature property for any of those signature agents. So talking again about the gastronomy focus down in Patagonia, I want to introduce you to our chef here, Federico Ziegler. This guy is incredible. I've really never met someone who's so bonkers about food. This guy, when most guests go there, they say, you know, you've met chefs that create incredible taste, but Federico really is truly an artist. This guy cooks down here. He spends his days during the morning walking around, like collecting herbs out in nature, and then coming up with his designs for dishes. And I wanted to include this, which is actually one of his sketches. This guy's phenomenal. Rather than really writing a recipe down, what he does is he sketches out his meals of what he wants to produce, and this picture kind of shows him when he plates everything. He has this idea in mind exactly the way he wants it to look and what ingredients he wants to put in there. Fantastic chef. He doesn't have an open-air kitchen, but this is a guy that comes out after every meal, interacts with every guest at Awasi Patagonia. How did you like that meal? What did you prefer? Do you like that flavor? Okay, great. I'm going to do something with that tomorrow, or day after tomorrow I'm going to do something. You know, it's really going to surprise you if you like this. So incredible chef there. And again, we need to have these incredible chefs since we are part of the Relais Chateau Hotel Association. Also, we have a new resident manager this year, and this guy is incredible. So we have Pavel, which just joined us. Starting the season, just started on October 1st with the opening of the lodge. This guy, he is Chilean, but he was actually born in Moscow and then lived in Moscow, Russia until he was, I want to say 4 or 5. And then his family moved to Mozambique, and he grew up in Mozambique until he was around 16, 17 years old, and then came back to Chile, but obviously had being exposed to this at a young age of the traveling. He had the travel bug early, and then he went on and he worked for 15 years in the cruise industry in management of the hotel, or online cruise management in terms of the hotel management aboard cruises. So he spent 15 years working for Norwegian, Crystal Cruises, and sailed the 7 seas, so had an incredible, life knowledge of learning about cultures and languages. He does speak English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian all fluently. So here's a guy that's seen the world, really interesting upbringing, speaks tons and tons of languages, super fun guy, so we're really excited to have Pavel joining us this year as the general manager at Awasi Patagonia. A little bit about our lodging here. We just built 2 new villas. So when we built this initially, we just had 10 guest villas. This property is very different. With the pictures I showed you of the main lodge, this is the main lodge building, and then the guest rooms are these individual villas that you see here. So we just built 2 more, so now we have a total of 12 villas at Awasi Patagonia. And let's go ahead and have a look at some of the villas. So again, here you can see how the property layout is with the main lodge there on the right, and then each of the villas are spaced out so everyone has their privacy and they have their own maximized views of the national park. They have their own private hot tubs as well. And these were built off, as I said, they were built off of the idea when you travel around the area, you see these blocky small wood structures, which are where the gauchos live in these outposts. We were trying to emulate that feel of the gaucho outpost on the property. So in terms of the villas, we have our regular villas. We have 11 of those, and then we have 1 master villa, which is a 2-bedroom villa for families. So again, 12 villas in total. 11 of them are the regular villas, which we can sleep up to 3 in those, and then the master villas are 2-bedroom, and we just have 1 master villa, and so that can take 2 couples or a family in the master villa. So let's look inside a couple of those so you can see our location. We're looking out over the towers of Toros del Paine National Park. Coming into the interior, this is the little private living room and wood-burning stove for each of the villas, and this is the view you wake up to in your private villa. So we didn't want to have a traditional hotel where there's room next to room being serviced by, housekeeping, pushing a cart. We wanted people to feel like they had their own outpost, that sense of space and exclusivity and privacy, which is phenomenal in Patagonia. So these are the villas, and again, they each have their own wood-fired hot tubs outside. So when you come after excursions at the end of the day, people will be soaking in this. And it's a really weird thing because you're so far south that people have been out on excursions all day. They'll be up then in the restaurant eating. They'll get back to their villa, realize that it's already 10:30 at night, but it's still bright daylight. I mean, there's times where the sun doesn't go down until midnight when you're in the middle, when it's like January down in Patagonia. So you can be sitting out in that hot tub watching a sunset at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. Just a phenomenal experience. Same thing as in Atacama. Down in Patagonia, you have private guide and private 4x4 vehicles for each of the villas. You know, in the Atacama, that's an incredible thing to have, but in Patagonia, it's even more so. You know, the park is so enormously large that travel times to get to different areas of it take a long time, and so the fact that you're not going out in a group of 8 to 12 people, where you're always going to have like those couple stragglers that, you know, people are always waiting on to get in the van. Here, it's just, you know, the couple or the family with their private guided vehicle, and they go. In terms of our excursions, so all the excursions are included. They're all in private, and we basically cover all of the national parks. So this is a little, in a booklet we will send to your clients or send to you before they arrive, just talking about the different areas of the park. Kind of Zone A and Zone B are the traditional areas within the park boundaries where the famous hikes like up to the base of the towers are located, where Valle Francés, Grey Glacier over here. So all of the areas where most of the other hotels operate their excursions, we do as well. I mean, there's nothing that you can't do from Awasi. But what's interesting is that we do have other areas that we operate excursions where none of the other properties do. This Zone D is actually the Awasi Patagonia Private Reserve. So this is an area where guests, it's really exclusively to Awasi Patagonia guests. And what's fantastic about this is that one thing, when people are coming and spending, say, 4 nights in Torres del Paine, the #1 complaint afterwards, and it's not even really a complaint because people love it, but they just say, I didn't realize how large this park was and how much time we were going to spend in vehicles. I mean, it's a reality. Say you're going to go over here to Lago Grey, you know, you're leaving Awasi 20 minutes to the park entrance, and then you're driving through the park over here. It can take an hour and a half to get over to Lago Grey from Awasi Patagonia. You do your excursion, and then you have an hour and a half drive back. That's just normal distances in Patagonia. So what's fantastic about having this private reserve for us is that people can, when they're doing a 4-night stay with us, can decide, you know what, I'm tired of being in the vehicle, I'm tired of driving, I don't want to be in a vehicle tomorrow. So we have the option where guests can just, with their guide, leave the villa during the day and do hikes in the Awasi Patagonia Private Reserve. All of our horseback riding we do there in Zone D with the local gauchos on the estancia. And there's incredible hikes up behind the lodge up onto the top of that ridge called Sierra Contreras, and it's also very wildlife intensive, which I'm going to talk about when I get to the Puma Tracking session. So we have Zone D, and then also the Zone E that you see is called Sierra Baguales, and we're close to Sierra Baguales. And for all our guests, I mean, it's something that our guides always recommend to our guests. You need to reserve 1 day out of the park and going out to Sierra Baguales to see what true wild Patagonia is. You know, people will be in the main areas of the national park, and, you know, the wildlife acts differently because the wildlife's used to seeing tour buses. They're used to seeing tourists. You go out to this area of Sierra Baguales, and you'll hike over these ridges and come across herds of like 400 wild guanaco who completely spook when they see humans and run off whinnying, and it really gives people a sense of what true wild Patagonia is. So Sierra Baguales, total favorite of so many of our guests, just because it's so different from the national park, and then they kind of realize how wild Patagonia is when you get outside of, you know, a heavily visited national park area. So excursions. What's great about private as well in Patagonia is that the weather can fluctuate so quickly. So even though the guests might decide, okay, we're going to go over and do a hike around Glacier Grey today or whatever, they might wake up and be driving over there and realize that that area of the park is completely socked in with clouds and it's raining, might be sleeting or even snowing over there. And so we can whip out the map with the guide and say, let's do something else today, look at it, completely change the plan around. So having the private guide and vehicle in Patagonia is absolutely indispensable. You also get this thing, I mean, Patagonia is so huge that when you're traveling around a group of 8 to 10, you really don't get that sense of solitude and space and majesty of what the park is. So really having, you know, all excursions and privates really adds a different element to people's trips there. It also allows us to do other excursions that are really hard to do in larger groups of 8 to 12 people. And when we do mountain biking, we do sea kayaking excursions as well. And then even our horseback riding is done where when the guests want to go horseback riding, we don't go out in a large group riding together. we actually go down to one of the gaucho outposts, which is on the estancia adjacent to our property, and we go riding with the gaucho. So it's not just a horseback riding experience, it's like a culture experience, and we can't really do that in large groups of 8 to 12 people. So getting on to some news, so Puma Tracking, this is something that we offer just within our normal program. If your guests express interest in this, they don't have to pay anything additional. We can have one of our guides take them around our private reserve to areas where we know that pumas frequent and to some of the areas where we have trap cameras. Or we do have an option if people are really, want to have the best chances of seeing a puma while they're there. We do have a $500 supplement where we have 1 or 2 scientists that work with us who are actually, their full-time job is tracking pumas around this area. And for a $500 supplement, we'll have them go out with the private Puma tracking guide for a day, and that really increases their chance because these are the guys that know exactly where the most recent sightings have been in the area. So the Puma thing, why this is important here is that this is actually the area in all of the Americas that has the largest concentration of wild pumas in all of the Americas. Each individual puma generally has about 50 to 90 square mile area which they need in order to survive, like 90 square miles of just hunting grounds. They think currently around Torres del Paine National Park there's a wild population of between 50 to 75 pumas in the area, and where they're concentrated is this area from Laguna Almagra, northern coast, the northern shores of Sarmiento, and then over here towards Baguales. And the reason why this area is concentrated, as you can see, is the forest here, and it's also outside of the park boundaries. There's not a lot of tourists, and you can see where Awasi Patagonia is. It's exactly smack dab in the middle of the healthiest habitat for pumas in the Americas. And particularly where we are, as you can see where the property is, we back up onto this lush forest on Sierra Contreras, which is a great place for concealment and hunting for the puma. So we're really right in the middle of the prime puma habitat there. We got into doing this, our guides, when we built the property, we have them go out and set up trap cameras all around the private reserve just so we could track wildlife movement. One of our concerns was, here is this wild area where we're building Awasi Patagonia, but how is it going to impact the wildlife here? So we wanted to have a way to track and see if there was any change from before we built the property until after we built the property in terms of wildlife movements in the area. And so we have these trap cameras all around the property, and every week the memory cards are collected and we see what's there. And what we see more of than anything are pumas. So here's one. Here's areas also where we do find like a guanaco or llama that's killed, where there'll be carrion. We'll put up trap cameras to see what will be coming and feeding on it. This picture you can actually see, this is a large male condor on top of a dead vicuña. And actually if you look up behind the condor, you can see the buildings of Awasi Patagonia there right at the tree line, just to give you an idea of where the lodge is located. And another trap camera picture. So again, the Puma tracking, if people express interest in this, it's no additional cost, but they're going to be with one of the Awasi guides, and the Awasi guide is going to take them around up in the forest behind Awasi Patagonia and go to areas where we know that they frequently hunt. And if we have seen with trap camera activity over the recent week, we'll go and sit up in areas like that. And then also people really want to increase their chances, we can send them out with a specialist guide for a supplement. So this is something that we're doing. And then we've had instances, this has happened twice actually in our past 3 years of operation. This is a shot that a guest took just last season out of their villa window looking down at their hot tub. There was a large cat sitting on top of their hot tub. So sometimes you don't even need to try hard in this area just due to how wild it is to have these encounters. A little bit about promotions here. We do have the same promotion for families during certain months. This is mainly in kind of our shoulder seasons down in Patagonia. So talking about March, April, and October are kind of the shoulder seasons to the prime Patagonia season. There we do great discounts for families that are traveling. And then this is really the one to know about, is that because we have the property in the Atacama and we have the property in Patagonia, if you combine those in the same booking, we give a 5% discount over the rack rates if you're combining the two. It needs to be a 7-night total stay, so that could be like 3 nights in Atacama, 4 nights in Patagonia, or vice versa. So with that, we give a 5% discount, and then we'll also give them credit for 2 hotel nights, or we'll do 2 complimentary nights for them, and they can choose where there's going to be. We can do that in Santiago, We provide a room either in the Ritz-Carlton, the Renaissance, or the W Hotel in Santiago. In Punta Arenas, we work with Cabo de Hornos Hotel. So if people are booking the combined 7 nights total in both the properties, they'll have that 5% discount, plus they're going to get 2 nights, and they can choose whether it's going to be 2 nights in Santiago or it's going to be a night in Santiago, a night in Punta Arenas. If they want to have the night in Santiago, you know, they don't need to be 2 consecutive nights. You basically just get 2 free nights, however you want to use them in that booking. So that's a fantastic value when you're combining both the properties, so keep that in mind. Again, this is really only going to be applicable when Patagonia is open. So the Patagonia season is from each year, generally from October 1st until around April 1st is when we close for the season there. So that's when you can combine the two.